Hello aspirants. We are going to talk about the achievement section that was introduced in the form to be filled for prelims in 2025. So there are some changes that are crucial for the students to understand before they start filling the form. Now, since this achievement section was a new addition for prelims form in 2025, there was a lot of confusion in 2025. But then this year, there is a bit more clarity with regard to what kind of changes have been made previous year. So we are going to look at the concept of DAF introduced at prelims level for the first time in 2025. These are the changes that were made into the notification as well as the prelims form in 2025. And what it included was the concept of DAF, which is detailed application form. Now, the reason why it is called detailed is because it includes a lot of things such as your higher education details, your hobbies and achievements, your OBC and EWS annexures, along with your service preferences. You have to rank the services as per your preference order. And then it also includes your employment details such as what places you have worked, how much did you earn, which was your place of work, which was the employer, etc., and the duration of your work. So all of these things were not asked in the prelims form before 2025. So the form has become much more elaborate in terms of the time that it requires to be filled. So which is why we are going to talk about this hobbies, also called the achievements section, in the prelims 2026 form. Now, to talk about the achievement section as a whole, it includes 4 sections. It is not just about your hobbies or what you like, but also the kind of achievements you have had at national, state and university level. So unless it is exclusively, explicitly specified that it has to be at the school or college level, it has to be at the national, state or university level. Let's say we are talking about prizes, medals and scholarships. These have to be at the national, state or university level. So we are also going to look at the examples of each of these in the next few slides. But then the idea is that the first column has to be about the prizes, medals and scholarships at national, state and university level. The next is your sports and NCC achievements. So if you have, let's say, done NCC or a national service scheme, or you have done Bharat Scouts and Guides or some kind of sports, you can mention here. The third and one of the most important columns is positions of distinction leadership held in school or college. Here you can mention the leadership position that you have held in college as well as school. The kind of precautions that you have to take here, we are going to talk about that briefly, but then the idea is that they have to be distinction leadership and not just common leadership like a class monitor, for example, right? So after that, the single most important section in your achievement section is the extracurricular activities and interests such as hobbies. So hobbies is a small part of it, but then your interests as a whole is something that can be included here. This is important in terms of getting a lot of questions in the interview if this is filled correctly. It is not always that questions from these sections will be asked, but then it depends on the nature of board. It also depends on the kind of interests and hobbies that you have filled in the form, which is why you have to fill this very carefully. Okay, so since we talked about the 2025 change in prelims form, why is it that this change is important and why is it that UPSC felt the need to introduce these changes? Now, UPSC strives to bring changes and reforms in its examination process in order to make the examination process seamless, in order to make it simpler for them at the later stages. So understand this from this perspective. Prelims form, which is released in February or March, does not have all of these components. But when you qualify prelims and fill the mains form in the months of June, it has other components such as your education details, etc. But earlier, before 2025, the DAF-II component, so mains had DAF-I, and after qualifying mains, you had to fill DAF-II. This DAF-II had to be given along with your hobbies, your achievements, your services, service preferences, your education details, etc. The changes that have been made is DAF-II has been integrated with the prelims form now. Why has that been done? In order to avoid any kind of confusion at later stages that students may have or UPSC may have, or the difficulties that UPSC may have in streamlining the entire process, which is why you need more clarity from the early stages itself, so that you know what kind of services you want to get into at the prelims level itself. You get to know the kind of cadres you want to fill at the prelims level itself. And ultimately, more synchronization in the form filling process between prelims, mains and interview stages. So ultimately, this was the goal of UPSC. The outcome of it was that there was a lot of confusion, especially in the early years. This is what happens every year when new kinds of reforms are introduced. This year, the new change that UPSC has brought is the new cadre allocation policy, which is something that we have already talked about in one of the previous videos. But then these kinds of changes, when they're made for the very first time, they bring a lot of confusion, a lot of doubt and a lot of chaos, which is why we are going to talk about this in the interview section in detail. Now, the weightage of achievement section in interview, is it that your entire interview will be about the achievements? Will it be that achievements will not be asked in the interview, or will there be a balance? Now, it can range from none to 100% depending on a lot of factors. It depends on the interview board to begin with. There are certain interview panels or interview boards headed by certain UPSC members which tend to ask a lot of questions from your DAF. There are certain boards, there are certain panels that begin with your hobby. Let's say your hobby is literature of Rabindranath Tagore. The panel will start with which literature of Rabindranath Tagore have you read? What kind of learnings have you made out of this? What kind of implementation of this philosophy will you make when you are a DM? All these kinds of questions can come from your from your hobby, the very first question that comes in your interview. This depends on the nature of the board. So there are some boards, there are some panels in interview in UPSC that start the interview with random GS based or IR or current affairs based questions, and the entire interview is just in the same direction. It does not talk about your DAF entirely. So it depends on the nature of your board, but ultimately, since there is a very strong chance that almost all the boards tend to go into the DAF in some proportion, you have to prepare your DAF and ultimately the achievement section very well. Number two, it depends on the uniqueness of your entries in the hobbies and achievement section. So how unique are your hobby? The common ones include such hobbies such as cricket watching. Common hobbies include walking or jogging. Now, the likelihood of getting questions from these sections is maybe just 1 or 2 questions at max. But when you write something like the hobby that we just mentioned, literature of Rabindranath Tagore, the chances of 4 to 5 questions being asked here are much higher. If you write hobbies like space news or watching space documentaries, there is a likelihood that you may get questions from the entire space domain. You may get questions on ISRO, you may get questions from India's space program, Gaganyaan, NASA, the kind of space documentaries you have watched. They may also ask about sci-fi around space. So all of these things open up simply because you mentioned watching space documentaries instead of only saying I watch cricket, because everyone else will write cricket in their DAF. So it depends on the uniqueness of your hobby and what kind of sector, what kind of dimensions does your achievement open up. Now the third is framing of your entries. How do you frame your entries? Like I said, if you simply say, I like to read literature, it is very vague, it is very generic, but ultimately if you say, I like to read literature of Rabindranath Tagore, if you say, I like to read poetry, whose poetry do you like the most? Or if you like to watch movies, which kind of movies do you like? Do you like social movies? Do you like contemporary movies? Do you like art movies? So specify what exactly is it that you like. Ultimately, what it comes to is art of leading to questions. How well you're able to lead the interviewer towards certain aspects of your interview. If you are able to lead the interviewer towards your hobbies, towards areas of your own interest, then it becomes much easier for you to get questions from your hobbies. Let's take an example of this. If you're talking about current affairs of India, and somehow your hobby is related to this, if you include the keywords related to your hobby, mentioning that as part of my hobby, I also follow this as part of this current affairs, the chances of this current affairs shifting towards your DAF becomes high. So it also depends on how well you're leading the questions toward your areas of interest. So it is all about how well you're equipped in handling, in conversations, in your confidence, etc. Upon seeing the weightage of this section, so like we said, it can be 0 questions or it can be almost 80 to 90 questions depending on all of these factors. It depends on you, which is why it becomes important that you choose your hobbies, your achievements in a very careful manner. Not just writing what everyone else writes, or not just writing what you just feel for the first time, right? So not just the surface level thought, a deep thought after thinking very well what can be filled here. And also one important aspect here is whether you want questions from your DAF. If you do not want questions from your DAF, then you can skip this area. You can make it very simple. But if you think you have the ability to handle questions from your hobbies and achievements in a very nice manner, you have very in detailed knowledge about your hobbies and achievements, please fill this very carefully. So it depends on how well you craft your achievement section and your DAF. That decides how many questions will come. This is also important for deciding score ranges in the interview. You can score 210 or you can score 110 based on a several number of factors. The factors are how well are questions on DAF answered. So let's say you have put a hobby such as watching test cricket. This is written in the 4th subsection that we were talking about, the extracurricular activities. You have said that you like watching test cricket. And here, when you start getting questions here, the answers do not show something that is appropriate at that moment. Or maybe your knowledge is not sufficient or matching the level of interest that you have just mentioned in your DAF. It means that perhaps you were just faking your hobby. You have written it simply in order to fill the space. In that case, they do not take it very nicely. They feel that you have a very lying kind of personality, a fake personality, and it goes in a negative way. You can go towards 140, 150 range also. On the contrary, if the questions on DAF are handled very properly, there are chances that you may score very well, as much as 210, apart from other important aspects such as your attitude that they will test, your IQ and EQ, your confidence, your integrity, and everything. So these are the prerequisites. Just knowing everything in your DAF, in your achievement section is not an indicator of getting a very good marks? It depends on a lot of factors, but one of them is knowing your DAF very well, handling your DAF very well. Number 2, personality reflected through answers based on hobbies. What kind of personality are you showing by including your hobbies? Are you talking about gambling here? Are you talking about insulting important aspects of society, or are you talking about something that shows that you are a responsible person, that you have diverse interests, you have a holistic personality? So your hobbies reflect what kind of a person you are, whether you are a social person, whether you are an isolated person, whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. And all of these factors in some way help the panelists understand what kind of personality you hold and whether you are suited for the job of a civil servant. And thirdly, the factor that decides the marks is where do the questions lead. So I'll give you an example of the kind of questions that I got in one of my interviews and the way it led me to a trap. The hobby that I had mentioned was something related to aquariums. And as part of this question, I had mentioned a river called Mekong. I did not think very well before saying this name, but I said Mekong River fishes that I put in my aquarium, and ultimately I started getting questions from Mekong's geographical area. Which countries does Mekong River flow from? Where does it drain? So the sea that it drains into the South China Sea, and the interviewers were wanting to take me to South China Sea and ultimately China, because that is something that was hot at that particular time. So where does it drain? Ultimately the China and Taiwan dispute and the politics behind this, and what can India do about this. So if at all you handle this very properly, this is very nice. But then if you're not comfortable knowing the countries that Mekong River flows from, where it drains, what is the dispute between China and Taiwan, the exact years around here, you have put yourself in a trap. Simply because you do not think very well while speaking, and you give terms out of your DAF itself, out of your hobbies itself, that make you get inside a trap. So important point is, where do the questions lead? If you have handled them very properly, if you have handled them in a manner that leads the question towards a very comfortable area, something that you know, then you perhaps may get very good marks. So it depends on a lot of factors, 3 of which we have already talked. Now let's come to the first section of our achievements, the awards, prizes and scholarships. We will talk about exact examples that we can see in this areas, and also the questions, the kind of questions that have come to candidates who have filled certain kinds of awards, prizes and scholarships. So we will look at the actual transcripts of some candidates and the questions that were asked in the real life interview in UPSC. So like we already discussed, the awards, prizes and scholarships have to be exclusively at the national, state and university level. Kindly do not mention the school level merit scholarships. Although I have seen a lot of people mention this in the interviews, in the mock interviews, but then ultimately this is not something that UPSC has demanded. It has demanded you to write awards, prizes and scholarships at national, state and university level. What does it show? It shows your areas of expertise and achievements. What kind of areas are you interested in? What kind of areas have you held expertise in? Something that can be useful to UPSC or something that can be useful to life as a civil servant. So ultimately they are looking for people who are good for a post of civil servant, which is why they look for certain qualities, for certain traits, certain personality aspects in the interview. Your awards, prizes and scholarships shows just this. Now, this area gives you questions if they are unique, significant and distinct from each other. Let's say you give very common, very known scholarships, perhaps the kind of scholarships that everyone holds. There are chances that you may not be asked questions from there. State scholarship for meritorious student. These kinds of things at the school level is something that you should be avoiding. Questions about the nature of achievement. What kind of questions are asked when you put awards, prizes and scholarships? The number one kind of questions are the nature of achievement. What was the nature of achievement? If you have received this award, what was the nature of this achievement? Depth of understanding. How well do you understand this area? We are going to talk about some examples. Let's say MUN, Model United Nations. If you were given an award of best delegate here, you've written best delegate award at Model United Nations at university level or college level, they may ask questions about United Nations and the working of United Nations. They may also ask questions on different bodies of United Nations, current issues that are present in United Nations, the international aspects. Why were you declared best delegate? What aspects of a best delegate are useful for a civil servant? So all of these kinds of questions may come from just mentioning best delegate award in Model United Nations in college. Apart from that, what kind of impact does your award or having expertise in this area have on the society? If you were declared best delegate in Model United Nations in your college, what kind of impact will this aspect, will this quality of you will have on the society in large, right? So you can say my confidence is good, my public speaking is good, my diplomacy is very good, which is something that can be benefited in the civil services. And ultimately, how did you benefit out of that? So what was the benefit for yourself is something that can be asked. Examples of good achievements in terms of awards, prizes and scholarships is NET JRF in a particular subject. If you have done masters in botany, in physics, in geography, in political science, and if you have received JRF or NET certification, you can definitely mention CSIR, UGC, NET JRF. The questions coming out of NET JRF will be related to academics. Research. Did you consider going into research? Why did you not pursue your PhD? Why did you come into civil services? You should be able to handle these questions. And also about some, since we are recently discussing UGC bill in the parliament, and you have mentioned UGC in the DAF itself in the achievement section, the chances of this question, UGC bill and the controversy surrounding it, being asked in the interview becomes very high. So everything mentioned in your DAF is something that will lead to certain kinds of areas, and you have to be prepared about it. Other kind of example would be prizes in debating. If at the university level or at state level, or even when you were in school and you represented your school at the state level or national level in debating or dancing, or let's say in college you participated in robotics or in hackathons or some computer awards, these kinds of things can be mentioned in the awards and scholarship sections. Apart from that, if you have published research papers in any reputed journals, that is a very good achievement that can be shown in your achievement section. Apart from that, if you have also received any gold medal or medals at college level for merit or for sports or for any other kind of achievement, that can also be mentioned here. Now we will look at the examples of questions that have come to real people in UPSC interviews out of this area. The first kind of example is the award was Best Delegate Award at Youth Parliament on Transgender Persons Act. So Transgender Persons Act, this was explicitly discussed in Youth Parliament in this person's college or whichever sector that this was done. The question that this person received was, whose speeches do you enjoy in Parliament? Now, this is not about what you did in the Youth Parliament. This is about parliamentary debates in general. So, the award was Best Delegate Award at Youth Parliament, but the question was, whose speeches do you enjoy in Parliament and why? And this was asked by chairperson itself. So, president of the board or chairperson of the board was asking these questions to the candidate. The next question was, what about PM Modi and Priyanka Gandhi? Compared them in terms of their speeches. Who is a better public speaker among them? So whose speeches are better, PM Modi or Priyanka Gandhi? This was an actual question in the interview in just this interview session. The second question, what is better in public speaking, using the heart or using the mind? Since this person says that he or she received Best Delegate Award in the Youth Parliament, definitely this person is a public speaker, which is why the question was asked, is it better to use the heart as a public speaker or the mind? And the third one was, what is your stand on same-sex marriage? Where did this come from? Because the Youth Parliament was on Transgender Persons Act. So Transgender Persons Act led the interview board towards same-sex marriage. So you should also be able to hold conversations on related aspects of the areas mentioned in your DAF. So your stand on same-sex marriage and what is the legal and constitutional status of the issue. So complex questions coming from very simple entries. But this is something that if you predict this very well before your interview and you prepare them very well, the chances are you will definitely score better. But if you are unprepared for these areas and ultimately you are shocked in the interview, the chances are you may perhaps not be able to answer and you will receive lesser marks. The second example of a scholarship, a real life example from a real life transcript that I have picked up, scholarship from the Ministry of Social Justice. The question was, what is the status of social justice in India? Give some schemes. So schemes for social justice have to be given here. Social justice in terms of women empowerment, in terms of tribals, in terms of gig workers. So all of these lead to social justice. This is something that was asked in the actual interview. So if you are, let's say, giving the schemes, please prepare also for the follow-up questions for these. Follow-up questions such as, what is the status of implementation of this scheme? What is the parent organization for this scheme in terms of the ministry responsible? What is the budgetary allocation for this scheme? If you have talked about Ministry of Social Justice, you should be able to hold at least 5 to 10 minutes of conversation on Ministry of Social Justice itself, the schemes of Ministry of Social Justice, etc. Then the third example is that of a prize in planetary rescue simulation. Planetary rescue simulation. The question were, what parameters were you given the prize on and who evaluated it? So do you understand why you were given the prize? That is the question. And who evaluated it? Were there judges? Was there an objective criteria? What is it exactly? The next question was, what is Robotron? Will AI replace many of the world's jobs? Now see, from planetary rescue simulation, we have come to Robotron, and from Robotron, we have come to AI. That is how the questions are led. The questions lead to more diverse areas. Will AI replace many of the world's jobs by 2030? Impact of AI on job markets and what jobs will be left with. So what jobs will we be left with is something that was asked. And who makes regulations on AI? This is a very common theme in interview. If we are talking about a particular dimension, a particular sector, then the interviewers also ask about the regulators. They also ask about the capacity in that sector that India has. Let's say if we are talking about AI, what is the capacity of India in AI in terms of GPUs? This is commonly asked in the interviews, and they also like to compare India with China and USA. The next question is, which countries have taken steps to regulate AI? Again, regulatory framework and comparison with other countries. And what has India done? So think of it from a very administrative perspective. You're not going here as a scientist. You're not going here as a manufacturer, not as an industry owner. You're going here as someone who wants to enter civil services. So you have to think like an administrator. What impact does AI have on the society? The impacts that a civil servant has to handle or resolve. If you have this attitude, you will certainly get more insights on what is better in terms of putting in the DAF. After looking at prizes and awards. Now we move on to sports and NCC. There is no need to mention leadership positions as such. If you were the captain of your school cricket team or something, that is absolutely not needed. Simply writing cricket itself is fine. If you're mentioning something, the chances are the questions will be very basic about that sport, because you're not saying that you're an expert in this sport. There are two different things: mentioning sport in this section and mentioning sports in the hobbies section. Mentioning a particular sports in that hobby section means that you're more interested in that, you have more expertise in that sports, and the nature of questions will be more difficult, which is why if you love a particular sport to the manner that you are able to handle conversations in very great depth, put that sport in the hobbies column and not in the sports and NCC column. Here only the sports that you have played in school or college, but something that you can also talk about. So don't put sports simply for the sake of it. Even if you have not played sports, even if you have not been part of any NCC or Scouts and Guides, it is absolutely fine. In my times, I did not fill anything here, and ultimately I did not get any question, which is something that is fine because I got questions from other areas. So no need to mention leadership position, but if at all you want, you can do it. There is no ban on it. For NCC Scouts and Guides, mention the level of certification. So if you have done NCC, whether you have B certificate or C certificate, whichever kind of certificate, you can mention it here. Simple terms like cricket, badminton, kho-kho, etc. can be mentioned without specifying the expertise level. So even if you want to mention your expertise level, that is a welcome step. There is no harm in it. But if you do not have any expertise, you can simply mention the sport here. That is also not wrong. Third, should be mentioned only if you genuinely play it. Do not try to fill it only for the sake of filling space. Do not fake a particular sport, because ultimately they will catch it. So do not fake it. If you genuinely play it, it will come out like that. Your answers will reflect whether you actually play the game. And if you do not wish to fill this, or if you want to avoid questions from this area, then you can simply avoid it. You can skip it. Let's say you want more questions from your hobbies instead of your sports domain, then you can keep it empty. It is absolutely fine. No one is going to judge it, and no one is going to give you marks on the basis of whether you filled anything here or not. And at last, basic minimum understanding of the game is needed if you're filling it. If you're filling badminton, please have basic minimum understanding of the rules of the game, also some important personalities, also the status of India in this game in terms of the awards that we have won, which are the important games happening worldwide, and some current affair related issues. So if you have written badminton in your DAF, chances are they will ask about recent matches happening across the world. Now we come to some examples of sports and NCC. The first example is that of boxing. This exact sport was mentioned in one of the candidates' DAF in the transcript, and the questions that this person got was, what is your specialty level in boxing? Which weight category do you play in? Would you say Indians are violent? Now, it has shifted from only boxing to social issues, because like we said, the interview is not for a boxer, the interview is not for a sports person, the interview is for an administrator or a civil servant's post. So it is going to talk about the social impact, the national impact, the administrative impact. So they came to, would you say Indians are violent? If no, why do we win medals in boxing and wrestling and not other Olympic sports? So javelin throw, these kinds of athletic events, why do we not get medals here, but only in boxing and wrestling? Opinion on conducting 2036 Olympics in India, if economically profitable. So this was a question to this person. 3 to 4 questions simply out of boxing. So if you have given, let's say, 4 to 5 questions from boxing itself in a particular interview, you have sufficiently discussed it to fill, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes of time in an interview, which is over 10% of the actual time of the interview. So you are talking about areas of your own expertise instead of unpredictable areas such as current affairs or international relations, something that you may not be aware of. So it gives you a very good scope of playing inside your own home pitch. The next example is that of badminton. The example of badminton got questions such as, there was a recent issue in India Open. Are you aware? This issue was in news in the previous week about a bird poop in one of the matches of badminton. Why are we able to host world-class cricket tournaments but not badminton tournaments? Which bird's feathers used in shuttle? Number of feathers, any issue in animal rights? So from just badminton, they have come to shuttle, which shuttle is used, which bird's feather is used, and then any issue in animal rights. So if you're putting a particular sports, you have to be very holistic in terms of how well you study it. And the last question, why is feather shuttle still more preferred in international tournaments? So almost 4 to 5 questions of very comfortable level of area for the person if they had studied it very properly. The next example is that of NCC. The questions are, why don't you apply for CAPF if you have a strong background in NCC? How has NCC helped you in personality development? Need for compulsory military service? Any such schemes? What is the need for NCC? Why does India need NCC? The qualities learnt in NCC. Which god is considered contrary to this quality? Now this is a very interesting transcript. Here I'll explain in brief. They asked about which qualities did you learn in NCC during your camps or during your training in NCC. The candidate had said that he or she learned the quality of not running away. Not running away from responsibilities. The next question that came from the board was, which god is considered contrary to this quality, and what is the name of this god in terms of this exact quality? Now my idea, this was not written in the transcript, but then if you look at this actual question, the answer could have been Ranchhod Das. Ranchhod Das is the name of Lord Krishna because he ran away from the battle because it was strategically important. He found it strategically important to flee away from the battle and then retreat and then attack again. So Ranchhod Das, someone who runs away from the battle or from responsibilities, is a name of Krishna. This is a very interesting question, maybe something that cannot be predicted, but tests your analysis level, your understanding, and your depth of personality. The next example is that of Scouts and Guide. One person had mentioned Scouts and Guide in the transcript, and the question that were asked was, what is the motto of Scouts and Guide? Which year was it formed? So if you're writing NCC or Scouts and Guide, these kinds of things, please also research about the year that it was formed, why was it formed, who formed it, at the global level, not just India level, but also global level, and which nation did he belong? So which country was that person from? How is it different from NCC? So if you are in Scouts and Guides, how is it different from NCC? And why didn't you join NCC instead? These are the actual questions from actual transcripts of candidates from 2025 UPSC interviews. Yes, so now we come to positions of distinction leadership in school and college. Remember, here they are specifying your expertise in both school and college level leadership. So apart from just the national, university or state level achievements that we have discussed previously, here you can mention school and college level of leadership. This gives an impression of leadership experience and skills, something that is important in life of a civil servant. Since a civil servant is not just a manager, but a leader, but also leader of people outside the office, not just inside, but also outside the office, the citizens, right? So your experience in leadership gives an impression that you can do better in the future as well when you are a civil servant. Here mention both college level and school level. Here it's a printing mistake. College level and school level leadership roles, but try to not mention class captain. You can mention head boy or head girl, but more importantly, something that would lead to better questions. Ultimately, the idea is that putting achievements should lead to certain questions in the interview. Mentioning these low level class captain or head boy, head girl, something that every other person in the interviews has written in the DAF, will not give a good number of questions. If you write something that is related to elected positions in college or school, president of a cultural society, or a cultural event in a school or college, or member of the student body of the college, or mess secretary, president of the mess, leadership role in office. If you have worked, if you were in an office and you were leading a team there, you can also mention it. Captain of a college or district or state level sports team. Here you can mention during school or college. So captain of a sports team, your cricket team, basketball team, badminton team, whichever team you have led. This is something can be done. You can also mention organization of camps or relief activities for social service. So if you have undertaken some social service campaigns, or even if you have led the placement cell of your college, these kinds of leadership roles can be mentioned here. And coordinator for events in college such as the cultural fest or placement, etc. Okay, so these kinds of positions of leadership can be mentioned. What kind of questions does this area give? The example was president of debating society in college. This person was the president of debating society in college. The questions were, what makes a person a good debater? How did it help you in personality development? The next was mess secretary. The question was, how did you minimize food wastage as cultural secretary? And the budget for food in the college, etc. The food wastage component can also take you to broad ideas of wastage or waste management, or the recycling concept, or how much waste does India generate, how much waste does your city generate. All of these broad areas in waste management, they can also come from here to Swachh Bharat mission, the rural and urban components, the budgetary allocation, the issues in it. If you are, let's say, the DM or the DC, what kind of steps will you take for reducing food wastage in your district? These are all the issues that come from just mess secretary. Okay. Now the next and the most important component of achievements is your extracurricular activities, because most of the questions in the DAF section are related to this area. If your entries are very unique, so unique entries are important here, because common entries would not lead to a lot of questions, or maybe no question at all. Highest chances of driving the interview in a particular direction if this is handled very well. Not only in terms of getting questions about what you do, but also the areas associated with that hobby. So like I had said, my hobby was something related to aquariums. So it got me questions from geography. It got me questions about rivers, about oceans, etc. It shows depth and diversity of interest and holistic personality. How diverse are your interests apart from only studying or apart from only playing games? How holistic is your personality? How diverse are your interests? If sports are mentioned here, you need to have a very detailed and expert level study of that sport, because you say that it is your hobby, it is your area of expertise, area of your interest. If these questions are done wrong, it may give a bad impression. It may lead to lesser number of marks if you do not handle this area very properly, because then it shows an aspect of your personality that you say you're expert in this area, but ultimately you're not able to prove it in the interview. So it does not show a good impression on the interview panelists. Now, if a hobby is mentioned whereby you are particularly coming to current affairs or certain field of study such as geopolitics, I have seen a lot of hobbies in DAF that talk about reading about geopolitical news, reading about social issues, reading newspapers. These are hobbies. You may get questions not just about what you read, but also invite questions from an entire sector. They may also talk about geopolitical news. They may talk about data and figures related to geopolitics. The situation based questions may be asked, such as if you are made the president of United States, what steps will you take? If you are made this person, what will you do? They may ask about names associated with certain sectors. They may also ask about opinions on particular issues, such as whether India should join the Board of Peace proposed by President Trump. These kinds of questions may come. So you have to prepare in depth about that area of study, not just what you do in that particular hobby. Now here, it is recommended that you give unique hobbies and not very common hobbies, because there are some hobbies that definitely will not get a lot of questions and perhaps may not also give a good impression, because the interview panelists will feel that this person is not very mature. These are not hobbies. This is something that everyone does. Now the examples of this is talking with strangers. I have actually seen people who have written this, and there is no harm in it, but then it does not show a good impression. Talking with strangers or talking to family, talking to my younger sibling, this is not a hobby. This is something that everyone does every day. This is recommended. This is something that is expected of you. You should be talking to your family. You should be talking to your sibling. Don't make your responsibility as a hobby. Now, walking is not a hobby. It is something that is usually good for a person, right? So don't mention it as a hobby. If you want to mention, particularly mention jogging. Jogging can be a better word for this. Now, something like spending time with the elderly, it is a good thing. It is not a hobby, right? So have this distinction of what is an actual hobby and what is something that is a responsibility, something that everyone should be doing. Then avoid vague and very broad-ended terms like following political developments. If you write following political developments, the questions will be very broad-ended. The questions may come from any particular sector, any particular state, any particular country that has had political developments. So narrow it down and narrow it down to Indian political developments, or let's say parliamentary development. These things are more particular. This will restrict your area of study. This will reduce your time. Then be specific. While writing your hobbies, please be specific in terms of which kind of literature do you read. If you say you like reading Hindi literature, mention whose literature do you prefer more. Reading Hindi literature by Premchand. Here you will get questions only about the literature of Premchand. You will not get questions about Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, right? Something that you may not have read. So your study becomes easier. It becomes restricted to only Premchand and only the literature written by Premchand. Then traveling to hill forts. If you are writing traveling, then mention which kind of places do you like traveling, so that hill forts have been mentioned. Now they will ask which hill forts have you traveled to, what are the problems in fort restoration, in conservation of forts, in history and in archaeology. So this becomes very specific in your area of expertise. If you are mentioning dancing, mention which dance form do you perform, maybe freestyle, maybe classical, which particular classical dance form. So make it very specific so that questions are very particular to that particular area. And then never fake a hobby that you have never done. This is a big no-no, because this will be very easily caught. And once this is caught through questions, they will not ask for any proof of your hobby. This is something that is very confusing for people, whether they should have any certificates or documents to show that they have a particular hobby. No one will ask for your certificates or documents of any of the entries in this achievement section. No one will ask whether you have received any award that you have shown. But then you should be able to handle the questions very well. You should be able to handle them in a confident and an integrated manner. Instead, mention terms that your areas of strength and you would like questions to be asked on. So this is something that can be kept blank also, but keep it blank if you do not want questions here. Do not keep it blank if you want questions to be asked from your areas of interest. If you want that the interview should go in a very predictable direction, then you should certainly work in this area and mention unique hobbies. Now, one question arises as to how many hobbies should we mention. Please do not end up writing too many. 2 or 3 is the most that you should mention. 2 or 3 is the most number of hobbies. Do not end up writing 4 or 5 or 6 hobbies. This is something that a lot of people do. What this will do is, it is fine, you can, there is no restriction, but then you are only increasing your effort in reading and studying for your hobbies. It becomes very unpredictable which areas will be covered in the actual interview. So make it very definite, because interview preparation is very broad-ended. Questions can come from anywhere. You have to restrict it down to your areas of interest. Now we come to the examples of it. The transcript examples are, the entry was watching movies on social issues. Now instead of only saying watching movies, the person has written social issues. So the question asked, why only social issues? Why not art movies? Why not thriller? Why not suspense? Why not horror? Only social issues, why? Then the recent movies you have watched, what social issues were highlighted in that movie? So apart from only the movie that you watch, what social message comes out of that movie? Follow up on the answer. Opinion on certain schemes of social sector, allotment by the government in terms of budgetary allocation, and facts and data. So if you have watched, let's say, a very common movie that everyone talks about in social areas, the movie such as Lipstick Under My Burqa, then the common themes coming out of that will be women empowerment. Women empowerment related schemes will become here important here. Women related data, the IMR, MMR, budgetary allocation in budget, all of these things will become important. The next entry is nutrition for healthy lifestyle. 5 nutritional issues and solutions to them. This was one of the questions. Look at the biscuit packet. Which one thing will you look for before eating it? This is actually a very practical way of looking whether this person actually follows nutrition. The interview panel handed over a biscuit packet to the candidate and asked which of these things will you look at for the first time before deciding whether you want to eat it. And then FSSAI and its mandate. Other things that are important on the packet and their impact. The final example that we are going to talk from the transcript is that of collecting stamps. Stamps often reveal political priorities of a country. How? Now here, this is something that is very philosophical in nature. This is not something that you will be able to prepare. This is something that has to be done at an analytical level. And it has to be very safe also. Your answer should be diplomatic, should be safe. Many fake stamps are also floating. How do you identify real from fake? So this kind of question tests whether this is your actual hobby, whether you are faking it or this is your actual hobby. If I ask you to create a stamp for Viksit Bharat, this is supposed to be Viksit Bharat. How should it look? So it looks at your creativity, your imagination, and your passion towards stamp collection. Then we move on to the impact on interview marks and overall result. Like we have already discussed, you have the chances of getting over 200 marks or below 120 marks if you do not handle the questions very well. It depends on a lot of factors. But then your achievement section has the potential to drive interview in particularly desirable areas and dimensions. You drive the areas that the interview will go towards, which is why a good mark range becomes easier for you. It becomes easier for you to prepare a particular area. If the questions are handled well, the unpredictability of the questions is reduced significantly. You will not have to worry about which kind of areas will be questioned. You will be very predictable about which kind of areas will the question be asked from. This also increases the chances of maximizing the marks above 180. If these sections are not handled properly, marks can significantly go down as well. So achievement section shows personality traits in you, and if you do not handle them very properly, it does not reflect very well. Now marks above 180 to 190 help in getting the desired service or cadre. This is something that is very obvious. Better the marks, higher the chances of getting the desired service. It can make a difference or 1 or 2 marks, but 1 or 2 marks in terms of your actual result is almost 10 to 20 ranks. 10 to 20 ranks will shift you from IAS to IFS, from IFS to IPS, from IPS to IRS. 10 to 20 ranks are quite a lot, and let's say you are within IAS, your cadre will also be decided by this. Maybe your home cadre. 1 rank or 2 ranks also decides difference between the cadre. So better the marks, better the chances, and also help in making it to the list if the mains marks are very low. If your mains marks are already very nice, 180 to 190 marks help in better service. But if your mains mark are very low, then 180 to 190 mark range or 195 to 200 mark range help in securing a rank itself, in making it to the list. Which is why it goes without saying that you have to fill this very carefully. Now the final slide and general instructions and precautions that we would like to give to you is these entries are editable again. Last year in 2025 also it was editable. This year also it is editable. You can edit it while filling the DAF-II, which comes after your mains result. Mains result will be announced by the end of November or early December, and your DAF-II will be filled by 10th or 15th of December. During this period, you can edit your entries again. So do not think that whatever you fill now is something that is final. However, good thought should be given to filling all the entries without any fake entries. Do not fake it even at this particular point. Do not fill only for the sake of filling it. Please think very well. It is preferable to keep the fields empty rather than filling vague false entries to impress the interview board. Do not put the entries simply because you want to impress the interview board. Do not fill too many entries and do not fill vague entries. It is better to just keep them empty. There is nothing wrong, simply that you will not get questions from there. Keeping the field vacant does not lead to less number of marks. It only means that questions will not be asked from area. Will not be asked. And try not to give achievements and interests that do not sound appropriate at the UPSC interview level, such as playing rummy or playing poker, or these kinds of issues are something that you should avoid in general, because it does not show a very good officer-like quality in the interview. So appropriate hobbies that are officer-like can help you get more marks. So this is all that there was with regard to your achievement section for prelims form. We hope that you fill them very carefully. We hope that you get all the kind of help that you require in this area and you do very well. Stay healthy and do very well. All the best.